If you've ever wondered how to use your sexual energy to manifest a life of more abundance, love, and freedom, then you're going to want to tune in to the entire episode of this podcast where I'm going to show you how healing and reclaiming my sexuality led me to an aligned and mission driven career path. How I used sexual mastery techniques such as sex magic to go from a broke single mom on food stamps to a six-figure entrepreneur in less than 18 months. How I've completely navigated the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and even come out on the other side of burnout. How I've positioned my business on an upward trajectory of financial success after that burnout period, and then the exact investments I've made to set me up for financial freedom. If you've ever wondered how your sexuality can lead to financial empowerment, I'm going to show you how the sex magic practice is going to help you explode your career. Super excited to dive in with you today, Hot Mamas. Welcome to the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire Podcast, where sexual liberation meets financial empowerment. Join me, Tilly Storm, top 20 sex coach worldwide, on my own journey to becoming a multi-orgasmic millionaire through the mystical art of sex magic, financial savvy, and guidance from my very own mystical yoni oracle. I'm going to reveal how I'm turning orgasms into cold, hard cash. Get ready to dive deep and discover the secrets to living a life of abundance on your own multi-orgasmic terms. Welcome back to the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire Mamas. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to this podcast, I want to welcome you and tell you also, please don't go back to episode 1 to listen to my origin story. Oh my goodness, I cringe every single time I hear someone share that they went and listened to every single episode of my podcast. I'm totally flattered at the same time, but I also cringe at it because who I was in November 2017 was a completely different, like 3 different levels of versions of myself than who I am today. And I haven't done a single reintroduction of myself since starting the podcast. But because we just changed the entire premise of the podcast and relaunched the whole thing, I wanted to share what's new and how my story has gone ever since episode 1 and how I see it in a different light as well. So, the first thing I want to share with you is how healing and reclaiming my sexuality led me to an aligned career path. When I was growing up, I was raised by very middle class American parents. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a plumbing, heating, and air conditioner guy who had a small business. And I watched my dad struggle so hard in business. He worked 14-hour days, many days, and my mom had the absolute luxury of having off in the summer months and being able to have the weekends off. But also she worked her butt off. She would go to school early in the morning and she would stay for about 3 hours after school grading papers, preparing for the lesson plans, doing all the things after school. So I saw both of my parents work really hard, and because of that, I have a really great work ethic. But fast forward to the time I'm preparing for college, and for those of us who got that message that we had to go to college and get a good career and make a good steady paycheck so we could have a really great retirement one day and where we wouldn't have to do anything after retirement. If you got that message growing up, that's what I got too. And so I actually never planned to go to college. I actually wanted to be a hairdresser. And when I was 18, I moved from New Orleans to Denver, Colorado, because I had to get out of the small town that I was from. I didn't actually grow up in New Orleans proper. I grew up about 45 minutes north of New Orleans in a tiny town called Covington, Louisiana. And it was so repressive. My whole childhood was very much about we went to church 3 times a week, and this is who we are. We're religious people. This is what we believe in. And since the time I was 15, I knew that who I was taught to be, who I was raised to be, wasn't actually me. And I had no idea who I was. So after some insane events with my mother while she was, come to find out years later, going through menopause, we had a really big altercation when I was about 17 years old, where my mom actually sent me to therapy, told me that because I was in love with a guy, that there was something wrong with me, that I was a terrible child, even though I was like the perfect child. I didn't do anything wrong as a teenager. I was literally like the perfect teenager. So when my mom sent me to therapy, I recognized very quickly that something was going on with her. Maybe she was going through menopause, and come to find out later she was. But during that time, I was like, she's actually the one who needs to be in therapy. So anyway, my mother and I had a really strained relationship for several years. The day that I graduated high school, I packed up my car. I had saved up $2,500, $3,000, something like that. This was back in 2002, so that actually got you a little ways then. So I packed up my car, drove to Denver, and just stayed there. And no one believed me that I actually left. I wanted nothing to do with my family. I did not want to go back to Louisiana at all. And from there, I set out to find myself. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with life. I met my kid's dad actually about 4 weeks after moving to Denver. So I was only 18 years old. And at the time, I got a coffee shop job in Denver, so not making much money. And I thought I was going to go to hairdressing school. So I signed up for hairdressing school, and he convinced me that I was too smart for that and that I needed to go to college because if I would just go back to Louisiana, I had a scholarship waiting for me. So as I went back, kicking and screaming with both feet, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go do something that's really amazing and really awesome, and I'm going to have a big impact on the world. So I went back thinking that I'd become a doctor and maybe be an OBGYN or work with babies in some way or the other. And I did that. I went back to Louisiana after being away for a year and several months, and I started college. So I went through college completely with blinders on. I had one goal and one goal only, and that was to get the fuck out of college and be done with it. I wanted to get my degree and go on to med school, and I just knew that I wasn't probably going to have much of a social life because I spent all my time studying. I was already nerdy, so it wasn't a problem for me. But yeah, I went through my biochemistry major and recognized that when I started studying to take the MCAT test to get into medical school, that I really sucked at standardized testing. And standardized testing and I did not go well. So after taking the MCAT 3 times and having paid like $1,500 to learn how to take the test and doing tons of practice tests, I bombed it 3 times in a row. So I'm at my senior year in college with a biochemistry major and no other goal than to be a doctor. And there was no chance that I was ever going to go work in a lab or do anything biology related because that didn't sound fun to me. And then when I did not get into medical schools, what do we do from here? Right after I graduated college, I ended up getting pregnant with my firstborn son. And that was in 2007. I had him in 2008 when the market crashed and the financial industry went to shit. And getting a job at that time was absolutely impossible. It ended up taking me about a year and a half post graduating college to get a job, which landed me back from Denver, Colorado to Louisiana. I know I had moved back after going to college in Louisiana to Denver, and then I went back again for, what is this, the second time now? Anyway, so lots of moves, but after returning back to Louisiana, I started wondering what in the world are we going to do, because I have this job as a city planner in Louisiana and it wasn't fun. I was hardly getting paid anything. My salary was $32,000 fresh out of college. Like, it was ridiculous. And eventually I had my second baby and took some time off, went back to work, where they ended up firing me because they didn't like the fact that I breastfed my baby. My boss ended up walking in on me while I was breastfeeding, or no, I was pumping milk in my office with my door shut, and he didn't knock on the door or let me know that he was coming in, and he just barged in and had a hissy fit about it. So we went to HR, we had a meeting, and they fired me on the spot. Yes, I probably should have filed a lawsuit on them, probably could have won tens of thousands of dollars, but at the time I had just gone through a very expensive divorce and I was lawyered out. So that didn't happen. So here I am, a single mom for the first time, with two babies, a 6-month old and a 3-year old. And I had no idea what I was going to do or be. But I knew that I really enjoyed birth work. It was what I had originally went to college for in the first place. So I signed up to become a doula and I took the doula training certification and started working in a birth center in Louisiana right away. And I was very successful. I ended up being the most successful doula in all of our area financially. So I knew I had some sort of business acumen even back then at that time. And I knew that also that lifestyle was not quite for me. I did it for 7 years, but I'm very much a morning person and I need regular sleep. And waking up in the middle of the night to go attend births was not my cup of tea. And I knew that I wanted to have a nomad lifestyle where I could work on my laptop and do what I wanted wherever I wanted to go. So I, at the time, started diving into my sexuality. Why? Because my husband at the time mentioned that I could only have an orgasm in one way, and I never even had thought about it. So that set me on a bit of a spiral of thinking, I wonder why I do feel so awkward and weird in my body, and why I have so many hangups about my saggy boobs, and I didn't want to have sex without the lights off. If they were on, I'd have to turn them off or just want to keep clothes on because I was really uncomfortable in my body. So I started to dive in and learn the jade egg practice. I don't really even remember how I was introduced to the jade egg practice, but I started diving into sexuality work and reclaiming my sexuality. I had a lot of religious conditioning that held me back, and I had a lot of healing work to do. And within a couple of months' time, I became multi orgasmic. I unlocked cervical and G spot orgasms. I was able to move through so much negative conditioning that I got from society, from religion, from my parents that was just not conducive to feeling amazing in your body and in your sexuality. So, after really doing that inner healing work on myself, my teacher at the time introduced that she was going to start a sex, love, and relationship coaching program. And that one of the career paths that she saw would be very amazing to niche down in was if you really niched into helping mothers reclaim their sexuality after having children. And having had worked in a birth center for 7 years, I definitely saw that women really struggled with sex and pleasure after having a baby. I was about 27 to 33 years old at this time, and I knew that the lifestyle of being a doula and a midwife apprentice wasn't for me. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, yep, that's exactly what I'm here to do with my life. I'm here to help women experience more pleasure and experience more juiciness and aliveness in their life is actually something that I didn't struggle with after having children. I didn't struggle with lack of desire. I didn't struggle with lack of pleasure, but I saw it in my friends. I saw it in clients at the birth center, and it just became a thing. So I paid the $12,000 to take a year-long coaching certification program that was more like a PhD program. It was so intense. For 2 years, I couldn't read a single book after completing the program because my brain was just fried from how much I'd actually learned through this program. So, after doing the sex, love, and relationship coaching training, I immediately started my podcast, and we're at November 2017. And at this time, I was going through yet another breakup, divorce. A tragic accident had happened earlier in 2017. And because of that accident, my husband at the time was losing his job of 20 years and he wasn't able to get another job. And it was really sad and unfortunate, but it took our family to the financial graveyard and we ended up having to cash out a 401k, go through all of our savings, and just to make it for a year, in which we didn't even make it that far because I ended up having to drive Uber on the weekends. I was doing that when I first started this podcast just to feed my family. And eventually the relationship completely falling apart because our house was going to go on short sale or foreclosure if we didn't make a move now. So we had to sell our house. When we sold our house, I asked him, what are we doing when we sell the house? He says, I don't know, but here's what I'm doing. And it didn't include me. So I took that as, okay, I guess that means we're not going to be together anymore. So, unfortunately, the relationship fell apart. I ended up having to move to a new town to be closer to my family where I had at least some sort of support. So, I moved back to New Orleans, which is 45 minutes from where my family was. And they were able to help out a little bit here and there. But that's when I started my business. So, healing and mastering my sexuality took me from being a broke single mom on food stamps in around April 2018. So that's when my house sold and I moved to New Orleans. And at that time, it was awful. It was horrible. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I did know that I was going to source success from my sexual energy and from my root chakra power of taking massive action. So that is exactly what I did. I knew that I was not going to go live with my parents. That was not on the cards for me and my kids. So we made it work and we did the thing. And from the get go, I burned the midnight oil. I took all of the actions. I had a very activated and alive root chakra. And I was able to really make some massive transformations and shifts in my life in a very short period of time. So within 18 months of moving out of that house with my ex-husband to being in New Orleans, I was able to create a six-figure income for myself and my two boys. And that would not have been possible had it not been for my connection to my sexuality. So, of course, during a coaching career and business, there are ups and downs. There are months when you launch a new program and you make $40,000 in 1 month. And then there's months where you make just the payment plans that are coming through. So it's very unpredictable unless you're able to really live within your means and learn how to spend less money than you make, which I did not know how to do at the time. I had absolutely no idea how to live on the bare minimum of what I was making every month. So if I had payment plans coming in, say the payment plans would only amount to about $4,000, $5,000 per month, I was not living on $4,000 or $5,000 a month. No, I was going on extravagant trips to Greece. I was going to Bali. I was doing all of these amazing coaching masterminds that I was paying for. I was doing all this shit, and none of it was on credit. I did not use credit because my credit was trashed because of that divorce that I went through. Having shared credit cards with my ex-husband, my credit was terrible. And that's why I was spending everything I was making, because I was actually just it was almost like I wanted to be justified in my actions. I wanted to feel like I could actually do something with my life for the first time, because that wasn't my experience with having money before. I never had money. I never made a lot of money. The most amount of money I ever made was $32,000 a year working as a city planner and absolutely hating my job. And then even as a doula, even though I was the most successful in all the area, doulas get paid shit for the work they do. So it was only like $24,000 a year, but that was considered good income for a doula. Probably still is in most places, but that wasn't sustainable. So when I finally started making what I call real money, I just blew through all of it. And it's so interesting because this is exactly what I see women coaches and entrepreneurs do. That they come into money for the first time ever and they're like, holy fuck, look at all of these things I can do with my money now. And some of them don't, and that's awesome. I think that most of us still have no idea what to do with the money that we make, because as women, we're not really taught much about money, and men either, okay? I'm not just going to say it's a woman thing, but we don't get any financial literacy training in school, at least at the time that I was growing up in Louisiana. We had the second worst education system in all the United States, and my state that I grew up in. I don't think anybody else really did either, though, but I know that's changing now, thank God. My soon-to-be 11th grader, well, he'll graduate a year early, so it'll be his 12th grade year. He's actually taking financial literacy math all of next year, which I'm so excited that's even offered, because it wasn't offered back then when I was growing up. I spent everything I made, and then I started to notice this isn't sustainable. Like, I cannot keep doing this, because what happens when there's bad months or I don't have enough payment plan money coming through to cover my expenses? And then I met my boyfriend, Chris. So Chris Jolly is the podcast host of the Pay Yourself First podcast and the Financially Free Entrepreneur podcast. And he didn't have these podcasts at the time, but not at the time that I met him, at least. So he's been a financial literacy guy and spent several years just like reading every single book, taking all of the workshops, learning everything he could about financial literacy himself because he had a similar story that I did. His is a little different, of course, like everybody's story is going to be different, but he was used to spending everything he made as well and not paying himself first. So this whole concept of pay yourself first was completely new to me. So he and I were reading all of the books, learning about all of the things. I had been talking to several different financial advisors to really figure out what the right investment things were for me, what was going to help me, because being an entrepreneur, you don't have the typical 401k, IRA setups like that. It's a little different. You can't contribute like that same amount every month. It's not going to be automatically taken out of your paycheck. I know there's companies that do all the payroll and could set all that up for me, but I didn't have enough employees to justify that expense every month. So it was like, okay, I have to take control of my finances myself, and there's not much resources for me. So anyway, that's why Chris caters his financial training to entrepreneurs because of that. There isn't much out there for us to learn about how to take control of our finances and be financially free. The way that I ended up doing all this is that I had in 2020 my best year ever, right when the pandemic was going. It was really, really good. Everyone was home. Nobody had anything to do. They're like, oh, yeah, let's do a program on sex. So that's what they did. And I had a really banging year. 2021 was also really good financially. And then 2022 came around. It was actually about the end of like winter, November, December 2021, where things started to really get hard for me. This is when I started to go into burnout. I had been burning the midnight oil for far too long. I had been spending way more money than I needed to be. I had no idea what to do with the money that I was making. I was researching, I was learning, but I wasn't actually taking the action to set myself up for financial success. So I went through 2 whole years of wondering what the hell happened to my business. My income has definitely dipped. I'm not used to this. I'm not sure what to do. I've lost my own mojo. I've disconnected from my inner badass and rebel, like I talked about a couple episodes ago when I relaunched the podcast, that I just didn't feel safe to really be connected to that inner badass and inner rebel because it was going to get me the fuck in trouble. Okay. I don't hold my tongue very easily at all. And during the pandemic, I had a lot to say. I had a lot of opinions. And I knew that if I continued to really let that part of me shine and be out, I was going to get myself in trouble. So I really retracted. I had this huge retraction period go on that was instigated by burnout, that was also just instigated by shit with the pandemic that was going on and things that were going on in the world. And I shut down. I disconnected from pleasure. Nothing in my life was pleasurable. We had just moved to Florida and we were just going through the motions. Everything was so political. Everyone was such on high alert. It was like no one was talking to each other. It was so hard to make friends, even in Florida. The area that we're at, I saw that Miami was voted one of the least friendly cities in the United States. And coming from somewhere that is like the most friendly, like in New Orleans, it was very different for me culturally to be somewhere where many people there didn't speak English and people just don't talk to you there. It's really strange. So when we first moved to Florida, it was really hard socially and emotionally for me because I didn't know hardly anyone. I only had one friend there that I knew of before I moved there. And it took me forever to try and connect with people. People weren't wanting to go do things with you. Everyone was still in pandemic mode and still used to staying home all the time. So it was a really challenging time for me socially and emotionally. It took me a while to come back. And sexuality practices definitely helped. Going to Colombia, adventures, trips, spending time at the beach, like spending time in nature, going on adventures doing my own self-pleasure practices, committing to them were the thing that really got me out of burnout, doing my own JDEG practices, things like that. And this past summer was a revival. I'd say more around fall of this past year. So in 2023, things really started to turn around for me. So I was able to navigate that huge contraction in myself and in my business and to positioning myself to set myself up for more success. So the way that I have positioned my business on the upward spiral of success is that I've created offers that I feel really reach different levels of wanting to invest in yourself. So people who are able to only invest a certain amount, there's offerings for you, there's offerings for group program prices, and then there's private mentorship prices. So I was really able to create the whole three-tiered, three different income level system, which has really supported my own financial success because more people sign up for things when they have an option that fits their budget. What did I do with the money that I've been making since then? Since last fall in 2023, we've seen a resurgence in cryptocurrencies, mega big time. I had been doing my research for about a year and a half on where the heck I wanted to put investments when I finally got myself in a better financial position because I knew that I was not going to go back to the way that I was spending money left and right like I was before. So I decided that the right thing for me was to purchase an indexed universal life insurance policy. If you aren't sure what that is, then you're more than welcome to look it up. You're more than welcome to book a call with Chris and I, and we're happy to share more with you about that. But this is a tax-free, so that was my favorite part about it because I don't like giving the government money. So tax-free investment. And it has a living benefit, a death benefit, and a retirement benefit. So the retirement benefit was what I was really interested in because I'm not really worried about getting some terrible illness and needing the money to take care of myself. I mean, I'm happy to know that's there, but that's not why I got it. I got it for the retirement benefit because it's the only retirement benefit that is 100% tax free, which is amazing. That also gets you about 15%, 12 to 15% yearly return on your investment, which is fairly high. Those are the two investments that I have been dumping money into lately. So instead of dumping money into travel and doing all of the things that I used to be doing before, it's now all going to investments and also gold and silver. So these are some of the things that I want to share with you because you're going along with this journey with me, okay? I don't want this just to be about me. I want us to all become millionaire investors together. So if that's like something that you're on a trajectory to experience yourself, then I want you to go download my sex magic practice and get in our WhatsApp group because the WhatsApp group is where we're going to be sharing tips, tricks, resources. You're going to be able to vote on the investments that I'm going to be making every month. So I'm really excited to get you all in there so we can actually build a community around this because I don't want this just to be about my journey, even though the podcast as a host, it's just about mine. But no, I want to invite you along and I want you to do this with me. Okay. How did I use sexual mastery practices to explode my career? First of all, there's no way in hell that I would have been able to create what I did my very first year of business had I not had a connection to body and source, had I not had a connection to pleasure. Pleasure was my fuel. If you listen to the last episode on refining sexual energy, the Taoist and Tantric practices that help me to create a financially abundant blueprint, then you will know that Jing sexual energy is what needs to be ignited in order to use that energy to manifest, to use that energy to have a spiritual awakening, to use that energy to go out and build the business. Because so many of us are walking around completely exhausted and burned out, which I've experienced, but I experienced that for many reasons. I did lose connection with my pleasure for a while there because of all that was going on in the world and because of my social situation at the time. And that contraction, the way that I got out of it was what? Pleasure. Pleasure, going on adventures, going out in nature, okay? So it was reconnecting to pleasure again. that helped me to get out of that contraction and move into expansion. All right. So, sex magic is the process of taking sexual energy, activating it, enlivening yourself, waking that Jing Qi energy up, refining that energy through each of the chakras, and using that sexual energy to manifest what it is that you are creating more quickly. Okay. So, there's no way that I would have been able to create what I did in my first year of business had I not known how to do that, because I was doing a lot of it then and a lot of sex magic then. And then there's no way that I would have created this expansion out of a previous contraction had it not been for connecting back to my sexual energy and pleasure and intentionally using my sexual energy to manifest more and to expand. Okay. If this is something that you're interested in, then Chris and I are teaming together, and we've put together a beta program called Sex Money Honey. Sex Money Honey. Yes. So if you are interested in how to turn your sexual energy into financial empowerment, this program is going to teach you how to do it. You're going to be working with myself and you're going to be working with Chris over a total of 6 months' time, because it's going to take at least that long to get you some wins. Okay. Rewiring things at an unconscious brain level isn't something that happens overnight. While it can happen in an instant, it takes all of the things leading up to that instant for it to happen. All right. And from my work, working at the unconscious brain level, helping people heal from sexual trauma, helping people really expand their sexuality, helping people learn to experience orgasm in different ways, and helping them drop the guilt and shame around their bodies. This isn't something that just happens overnight. So it takes a while to get to the sexual mastery practices. So we've got to do what we need to do wherever you're at. Maybe you've done some sexuality work before, and maybe we can start in the expansion phase. But maybe for some of you, others of you, we have to start in the reclamation phase before we can get to expansion. And then from expansion, we can go into mastery. So it takes time. And with Chris, you're going to be working on financial literacy, getting the financial education you need to be empowered around your finances, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you continue to outsource your finances to someone else, to think that someone else can just deal with all of that for you, you're going to end up losing out on a lot of money. Trust me, he's interviewed over 80 entrepreneurs on his podcast, the Pay Yourself First podcast. And it's so interesting how many of them just give all of their financial power to their financial advisor or whoever they're working with around their money. And they have that person tell them everything they need to do to make money. And then they end up forgetting about the 401ks that they had. They end up recognizing how their index funds aren't making them any interest at all. Like, it's so low, it's pathetic, when they could be making much, much more. It's so interesting to see all of the ways that they're missing out on money because they have totally let other people be responsible for the money because they didn't want to go get the education and the empowerment for themselves. You are going to be working directly with Chris in our Sex Money Honey program to get you out of that thinking, to get you financially empowered so you can make amazing, clear financial decisions that are in alignment with your values. And if anything, I think that's what Chris is so amazing at, is really finding what is it that you want to put your money into that feels good to you, that can also get you the return. Because that was something that I personally wasn't going to invest in many of the S&P 500 companies. I don't invest on the stock market at all because I'm not in alignment with my money going into Pfizer. I'm not in alignment with my money going to many of these other companies that just are not good companies that I want anything to do with. Things like this, those companies do not share values with me. Therefore, it's not something that I want to put my money in. So finding something that was much more in alignment with my personal values and that felt good to me and that also gets me high returns, that was where it was at. And Chris can help you do that. Anyway, if that interests you, the beta round is going on. It is open through April 11th, the beta round. And it is discounted, but please understand that you do need to be making decent money already, okay? If your business is pulling in income, just like mine was when I was making over 6 figures a year, or I don't know if that means I was making 7 figures, but I was making about $150,000 to $250,000 a year in my first couple of years of business, and I was spending all of it. So if you're making good money and spending all of it, you have the money to invest in yourself. You also have the money to make investments in other things that can make you more investments. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. If you're already making decent money and you have money to invest in yourself and to actually purchase investments, then this is who we want to talk to and see if this is a good fit for you, because we want to help you become financially empowered and financially free and set you up for success. And we also want you to feel amazing in your body and sexuality and have a deep connection to source and to spirit and be in alignment with where you put your money and all of this stuff, and how to manifest even more of it so that we can all live in complete freedom and abundance. So if that sounds up your alley, then go book a call at the link in the show notes with us, and we're more than happy to dive in with you and see if this is the right program for you. And just remember, it closes April 11th. So get your application call booked in now, and I'm so excited to meet you on the call. All right, loves, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.